Hello, welcome to Nezo's Bad Shop. I'm your host Nezo, and tonight, well, it's technically early morning. We're filming here at the Strictly Sideways track. You are looking at two Yokomo drift cars. These are of newer generation. These are the Rookie Drift 1.0 slash YD2Z, because it was a name change, and the recently released Rookie Drift 2.0. And this is a comparison video where I'm going to compare them side by side so you can see the differences. And there's a good amount of differences between the 1.0 and the 2.0. And when the Rookie Drift 1.0 came around, Yokomo went through some changing in the back end or whatever it was. Some things changed and, well, names of cars changed, and the YD2 name was no longer. So this car, which was known as the YD2Z, sort of overnight just became the Rookie Drift 1.0. It was a simple name change to go along with the new generation of cars, but in terms of when they did that name change, nothing on the car changes. It is the same exact identical car. So whether you bought a YD2Z or a Rookie Drift 1.0, it was the same car, which was a little annoying at the time because we thought we were getting some different changes or some sort of stuff like that, and literally nothing changed. So that was quite annoying. But with the 2.0, many things have changed. There are a good amount of similarities, but there are things, a good amount of things that have changed, and for good reason. Mostly because the Rookie Drift 2.0 takes after the MD 2.0 and the SD 2.0 generational line of cars, that being the Super Drift and the Master Drift, which I will do a comparison later on when I get them sort of all around or whatever. But the Rookie Drift 2.0 does have a good amount of similarities to the Super Drift 2.0, which is very good because on track, this thing is out of the box. It's quite a monster, and it's as good as the RDX. It is that freaking good. And I couldn't believe it myself, but drove it and we sent a full battery through it, me and a couple people, and is really, really epic. Works really, really good. Very good, super good as an RDX, and it's worth it. And it's actually in Canada, it's $90 cheaper. An RDX is $420 Canadian. This is $330, and you actually have a bit more adjustability out of the box and stuff. But we'll go through all that. So as an overall look, you can see in the front end, it's pretty much the sameness going on here, except for the steering racks. Those are different. I'll show you that in a second. If we move towards the middle of the cars, the center area here where the YD2Z style upper end slash SX3 and all that stuff, basically the upside down servo spec for that and that are pretty much the same in those areas. The servo mounting is very close, but is a little bit different. This is a little further back. By design. The battery, if we move further back, has been moved further back and is a totally different tray design. No longer do we have these holders, these pull-off holders from the old YD2 lineage. This is where this came from. This is the more updated version, but this is from the YD2. So no longer do we have that. We have a tray, which has little flip tabs, right? The battery pops out, and the battery is held in there quite good, actually, and these pull tabs or these flippy tabs are very nice, and it works very good. So that's very nice improvement. And just like these ones where you can put the extended battery part, you can move this tray outwards with a few screws and screw movement, and away you go. And you can run a long battery. Then if we move to the back, this is where things really took a huge change. The transmissions are completely different. This is a 3-gear YD2Z spec with the motor pinion stuff on what we'll call the right side of the car, right? So it's on, if we're looking at it head on, left side. If we're looking at it head on, right side on this side, because this is a 4-gear transmission. But this was the last of the YD2Z designs, 3-gear, diff, idler, and main input. So 3-gear design. This is a 4-gear, but this is taking after, if you can just see it in there, this is taking after the SD-MD design of transmission, which means if you buy the optional SD 2.0 transmission in fancy aluminum color, it'll bolt right up to this car. It'll probably even bolt up to this car because, as I'll show you, the mounting holes are pretty much identical, but with some subtle differences. Yeah, having said that, with the transmission, the default motor position on the RD2 is high, whereas default on the 1.0 is low. The YD2Z is low, but you can put it high. Whereas this will let you go low to high. This will let you go high to mid-high. That's about it. But this one will let you do a little bit more. This one I don't think will let you do full standy-uppy like this, but pretty close in regards to that. And other than that, the rear suspension is in similar positioning here as you see it. The car's laid out. Similar sort of wheelbase, but the arms here on the 1.0 are long and the toe blocks are older YD2 style block. S style rear upright with the camber change area. You can put your link here for a camber change on squat. So that's remnants of the old YD2, and the shock tower is a slightly updated version of the older rear shock tower to accommodate for the 3-gear transmissions positioning. But on the 2.0, the arms are shorter, the toe blocks are much wider, like these are 45 something rather, blah, 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 48, the maximum in the rear. And this one is like 57 and 58, and I'll show you the differences. The knuckle is a redesigned E-knuckle, one less hole, but a little bit slimmer, but it's an update of the older YD2 E-knuckle on the 2.0. That's fine. It gives us a tiny bit of camber on squat, very little. The older car, none. Okay, so just to show that off. And then if I flip the cars around completely just to show it, you can see here the shocks are the same. The shocks are the same. I've got way more preload here because I had very lightly tuned this car. There's no stoppers in the front of the knuckles on this car, but I'll explain why in a bit. But this shocks are the same, but the springs are different. See these springs? These springs here and on the front of the car, they're the option front springs that Yokomo spec'd for this particular car, and a couple other cars as well. They put the optional softs, so that's a nice touch. You didn't have to buy them. So this car has the optional softs. This car, however, has what they're calling the RDS spring, the rookie drift spring. And what it feels like medium soft, not super soft, but it feels like a medium soft, so it's still on the softer side. And the chassis does have a good amount of weight shift from the box. I installed 3 millimeters of preload here. On this car, I put a little bit more because of the difference of weight positioning. And the other major changes, this car did not come with the rear diffusers, as all the predecessor YD2s have. The Bat diffuser, or the shorty one here, the Batman one as we called it. And crucially, like I was saying, the arms are shorter, as you can see, and there's a block here, this extra block here for the rear shock mounting to keep the shock more straighter in line in the rear end. So they've added that as well on the 2.0, this one. The other major change is with that SDMD style transmission, we have rear ESC mounting as a stock factory thing now. 2 screws it bolts on just over the quick change rear diff cover. And compared to an RDX, has the pull-off mount, which just pops right off. But yeah, at least so that's nice to see. So we have a higher motor mount position as standard on the R 2.0, and a rear ESC mount, which this car does not have any of that, but it does have the quick change diff, so that's still a thing. And the differentials are identical in these cars, plastic gear-based oil-filled differentials. I believe this car had 10,000 weight in it. I believe. I may have to verify that. This one has 7,500, so a little bit less thickness in this car, in the 2.0 versus the 1.0. But good news, the Yokomo post-hole geometry is all retained. It all's the same. It's all good. And to fit the super body I had on in the the shakedown, it's a Yokomo-based Super A90 from the RTR kit, actually. It fit right on. I just had to flip these body posts from how the instructions said mounted in the stock, assembly, and that was fine. I just flipped them around, just take the screws out, flip them around, so I mounted them on that side instead of that side, and body dropped right on. So post-hole geometry is retained, and that's very good. Now we'll deep dive a little bit into the front end and the rear end here, since I gave a more overviewish in that way. So if we look, here's the 1.0, here's the 2.0, okay? 2.0 has electronics in it, put it that way, because I just did the shakedown like half an hour ago. This got electronics in it, and I'm going to tell you what comes with it and all that good stuff. Now, front ends. You'll notice the front bumpers are identical. They're identical top and bottom, okay? Classic YD2 front bumper, tried and tested, true. They say install the foam, and you see the foam in the old one is a little thicker than the newer one. It's pretty much the same though. Body post, same. Pins, the same. What is identical in these two cars in the front end? The shocks, the shock tower, the bulkhead, okay? The back piece here, identical here. This brace here, identical, okay? and that's where it stops. Sorry, and the front rear there toe blocks or suspension mounts for the lower arms. Those are the same. Same 39.5 spec millimeter for that. And that's where it stops, sorry. Because after that, we have some changes. We have difference of knuckle. The YD2 or the YD2Z/1.0 has the older S-style knuckle on it with the offset upper mounting. Okay, but the Rookie Drift 2 has a redesigned E-knuckle. They've moved the position here. It's more straight up and down, as you can see, as opposed to here where it's offset. So you see the offsetness. So that's a change. And the lower arm is also redesigned. You can see the difference in the design. It's a little more slimmer, okay? And there's less holes here. There's 2 holes for mounting the shock on the 2.0. We got 4 because it's a redesign of the older YD2 front arm, lower arm. But so we have less holes. However, I don't think it'll matter that much because the geometry of the shock looks pretty good, and the car drives is amazing. So that's that. And then on the upper side, this is the original upper arms for the YD2, classic, tried and true, work good. This, in a slightly different mounting position to this car, is the what we're calling Rookie Drift 2 upper arm. However, it's a plastic version of the older version 2 upper arm for YD2 that you can get in aluminum. And they have these in all colors, so you can dress up your car with that, the Rookie Drift 2 right away. And then the last major thing they changed, which I'll turn the car sideways for, is here, the wipers, the bell crank wiper and the rack. This is classic YD2. It's been around since the beginning. I don't think they've really updated geometry on this or this that much over time. It works so good, and a lot of people swear by it. I still love it personally. Gives a very direct steering feel, as opposed to a slide rack, which is a little more smoother overall in its delivery of the steering. Both equally tunable, but some people do prefer a slide rack feel over a rack, a bell crank rack. But that's the original designed rack, as you can see it working there. Okay. And you can see it more in the front there, that original rack. See how wide it shoots across the bulkhead? Okay. Now, if we look at this car, we have a new bell crank rack system. The bell cranks themselves, the cranks down here, they're pretty much identical, but they are slightly updated. I did compare them to another car, another older one, and they are a little bit different, tiny, tiny bit. I think that's to work with this newer rack, which you can see here. You can see that newer rack in there, and then if we look at it from the front, you'll notice the balls here are off to the side, not standing up like on this one, not standing up. They're like this instead of like this. What do they call that? Horizontal versus vertical? Yes. So they're that. And the rack itself is smaller. You can see here, see how it doesn't protrude out of the sides? Like you can kind of see it coming out of the side there. And yeah, it's a slimmer rack, and it's designed to mimic slide rack functionality with that horizontal ball position. And in terms of the steering lock available, now I've pulled the stoppers out of here. Stoppers are a factory thing. There they are. See the stopper on the knuckle there? That's a factory thing. This car had it as well, but I think I put a light tune into it. So with the light tune, this is lightly tuned. So with the light tune, I've got it up to 90. With the stopper in it, if I were to do the stopper, that's roughly where the stopper would have been. If I look through the knuckle stopper's hole there before it touches the arm, and it's pretty close. Let's see here. It's pretty close, to be honest, but I believe this geometry on the 2.0 is improved enough that we've gained just a little bit more angle overall at the high end with a stopper. Just a little bit so. I think it's definitely more effective than the 1.0 in terms of driving. So that's a big improvement on the front end, even though I'd say at least 80% of this is the same as this car, right? As I pointed out, there's a suspension mount, bulkhead, shock tower, shocks, back mount piece there for the upper arm, and that brace, the downward brace there. All the same, but those few other changes really do improve the front end drivability a lot. So that's a big change. Now if I move to the middle of the car here, a little more in depth, you'll notice the chassis plates. That's the Z/1.0. It's more slimmer here. And when I flip them over, I'll show you that there's more cutouts and stuff. I'll show you that as well, how they've done that. Very similar to the SD2. The upper decks are different because the upper deck stops here just before the bottom transmission brace, where the transmission starts there, but this is where the motor goes. So the transmission/motor area. The upper deck stops there and then it's bolted to the middle of the car. This upper deck goes all the way across to the transmission. Okay, see that? It does not connect to the car anywhere in the middle. So there's more flex right there because it's extending further. And that's just like the SD 2.0. So subtle changes in there. The battery position is also changed. We've moved the battery fully towards the back of the car. As we can see here, it's right up against, pretty much almost right up against transmission. The transmission sits a little further back, but the motor hangs over more. A little more front. It's pretty much in line with the rear axle in that sense, very close to the how you can do an RDX and a couple other cars. The drive shafts are a little angled though; they got quite an angle on them. But in terms of the middle of the car, you can see the battery position is different. So here, the 2.0, it's moved further back. The 1.0 / the YD2Z, it's more in the middle, and that's just for balance. But they found this is a better way to go. And that's sort of how the RDX is as well. So this, because the 2.0 top competitor, the thing it's going to go up head to head against is the RDX, and it can do it perfectly. Now, there is one thing I'm going to note right here, because I have electronics installed. This little area right here is where you'd install the optional available fan mount to put a fan on your car. And because I had a boosted setup in here and I didn't want to cook my motor, I quickly installed that fan mount. As you see the fan installed on it, I quickly installed the fan mount and put a fan on it. But this fan mount in here, or this fan, does not come with the car kit. I just want to stress that. This is an optional extra. Same with the fan. I put that on simply to protect my Boosty Boy setup here because I didn't want to cook it. So, having done that, we can move on to the rear end and I can explain a bit about the transmissions. Now, this car, the 1.0, classic YD2 transmission style. This happens to be the 3-gear one from the later versions. Pretty much, I think, the rear motor, the YD2R, I think that's where the 3-gear first debuted, if I remember right. If it wasn't, then it was the YD2Z, for that matter, slightly redesigned. Quick change diff basically was the last thing they did on this transmission design. Shock tower, standard is for most YD2s. The shocks, as I said, standard throughout the years. And yeah, so that's the 1.0 car. But you do have optional position of motor mounting, high and low, all that stuff. On the 2.0, we have the SDMD2 transmission style, which gives us a default high motor position, which could be put to mid, but mid only. We can't go low, LCG, which I think we're moving away from here in 2024. And with that MDSD style transmission, as I was saying, rear ESC mount over the quick, hiccuping, over the quick change diff. And the shock tower is pretty much the same, but it's been slightly redesigned to just fit up properly and do the proper body post geometry, and so that everything goes very nicely. As you can see, things are very nicely in line there, much like they are here on the old car. But this is the new way, and this actually is working really good, this rear end, with this config. So quite pleased. Yeah, so I mean, the 1.0, it was good. It was pretty nice out of the box. In comparison to this is much better. This is a big improvement, big evolution, and is definitely worth it. It's totally worth the money. I can recommend it, hand on heart, right here, right now. The other major things, I guess, I'll point out once I flip the cars over. Some of the suspension changes in the rear. The length of arms in the toe blocks. And other than that, like, there isn't too many other major changes. The ball cups and studs are still the same new Yokomo 4.8 spec, and I don't know if they've changed any of the tolerances in there or whatever. This car, time will tell. This car's ball stud slop, ball cup slop on it is what I've seen going the way of what my MC1 was within a few months. People say you can go to a different brand like Overdose to get rid of that slop, have better tolerance, or buy the Yokomo BD7 hardened version or whatever, the white ones or something like this. I'll have to find a part number, but that's what I was told will be an easy fix. If you can find the part, away you go. Probably easier to find than MS2. Yes, so I'm going to flip the cars over now and just show you a couple things on the undersides of them. So this car's got taller postage, so it's sitting on an angle. But if you look underneath, it's pretty close in terms of the mountings and the holes, because this is all YD2 bulkheadery. Bumper's the same, right? Back here is different. See how slim this is versus how going outy that is for the body or the battery styles, whatever. And in the front and rear, you can see how much cutout there is here. That's a good amount of cutout. There's a good amount. You see, there's the toe block, there's the bulkhead, right? So if we come over here, toe block, bulkhead, there is what seems to be just a little bit more cutout. Yeah, it almost looks the same, but I think it's a little more. It might be identical. I didn't put I didn't put these on top of each other, but pretty dang close, but it does look like a little more. But in the rear, holy moly, definitely different. So there's the rear end. The 4 here are transmission, toe blocks, and the rear bumper. Transmission, toe blocks, no rear bumper. But look at the amount of cutout. Look how much more I can see through here than I can through here. So more droop available, like all the droop really. Major difference, you can see the length of the arm. That's a 48 mil, I believe, and this is 45 mil. Big spacer here to get the shock to stay straight. We don't have that here. We only have just the ball stud with the built-in spacer. But here we got ball stud, built-in spacer, and a plastic bolt-on piece that we added as well. And you can also see this toe block it's bolted here, but is moving down. So it's kind of like I don't know what kind of shape to call it, but it's a squiggly toe block because it goes woo, right? But it works good. The pin length is actually the same. I told somebody else in a DM that the pin length was longer, but it's not. It's the same length. The positioning of all this is a little different because of the mounting of the transmission and how the transmission sits. So the biggest thing I can point out is here. Here's the transmission. Look at this gap, the spacing between these transmission screws and the toe block screws. This is the 1.0. Here's the 2.0. Transmission, toe block. See the difference? Yeah, big difference, right? Now, the only other thing is here, this is where the bottom of where's this? That's the battery mounts here. So here's the battery mountings here. Okay, battery mountings are out here on this car. That is for a center brace, which we don't have because that's for a different transmission type. Right, so that's the major differences there. Really, the other major thing I noticed personally, servo mountings. Here's the stock servo mountings as they've always been on a YD2 based car for time. The Rookie Drift 2 has 2 sets, but we don't have like an oblong one here for adjustment. It's straight up. So sort of moving away from this, but this allows us to move servo front or back. I'm imagining for the low profiles or the standard, so you can move stuff back or forward or different mountings to get certain servos installed. But go with a low profile, you won't regret it. And the other thing that you can't see on this 1.0 is it would have had the knuckle stopper, which would have put it about like there for the lock. Whereas this one has the stopper installed still because it's just been factory run. But it's running really good. Other major change, this stud here, I forget what they call that, arm piece, whatever, that aluminum bit in there, steel bit, sorry, that steel bit, that is changed on the lower arm because it's slimmer in there, so they've put the slimmer piece down here. Basically, the part that goes into the aluminum version of this, that goes out of here, is now actually down here on this lower arm. And that's the other major change on this car. And as you can see as well, the last other easier thing to see, 4-hole adjustment on the older YD2 revised style lower arm, 2 holes on the newer, slimmer style lower arm. And that's pretty much it in terms of the differences. Oh, you do get a 24 tooth pinion, which you do on that car as well. You just don't see it because there's no electronics installed. In terms of the springs, I can't compare this because there's no electronics in here for the difference. But in terms of how that felt to how this felt, pretty similar. This has a nice plush looking feel, especially with the weight. You can see it there, right? You can see those shocks reacting. That's 3 mils preload, so 50 mil oil or 50 weight oil. Yes, number 50 oil, whatever you want to call it. But the shock seems good. It shifts weight good. The unbox or the shakedown will show that if you've already watched it. But that's an in-depth comparison between these two cars, the Rookie Drift 1 and the Rookie Drift 2. If you're wondering if it's worth it for a 2.0 over a 1.0, 100% it's worth it. This car is excellent. It drives excellent, as good as an RDX. I'm saying it. That's my opinion. I'm standing by it. And yeah, definitely. If you can get your hands on a 2.0, do it. I've read pretty much nothing else but good reviews on this car, the 2.0. Yokomo definitely paid attention to what other manufacturers were doing, and they stepped it right back up. And this is an excellent entry in 2024. I forget when it actually released, but pretty much for 2024. And to go along with the range of the Super Drift and the Master Drift, which I'll compare later, this is definitely a really good car to think about. And on the budget category, it's this or an RDX, basically, whichever ones you can get your hand on, and or whichever brand you like more. And I will do a comparison to RDX later on, a box stock one, because mine's no longer box stock. It's lightly tuned and going to get more tuned. But yeah, that's that. So thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. If you've been watching all the way through, we're almost 26 minutes deep. And yes, thank you for watching the whole thing. And let me know what you think. If you've got a 1.0 or a YD2Z, basically, what you've done to it, what you think about it. If you're thinking about going from that to this, it's totally worth it. You can then pass this down to someone else getting into the hobby, or a friend, or this or that. Heck, you can probably even take some parts off this and put them on here for certain things, like body posts for sure. The shocks, yeah. The springs, I could, yeah, 100%. Couple things right away there, if I really wanted to. But yeah, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you got a 2.0, what you've done, all that cool stuff too. More videos to come, and more on-track comparisons and lots of other stuff. And I'm trying to keep up really, really close with comments. So you drop them, I'll reply to them, and we'll go from there. All right. Thank you for watching. Nezo out. Bye-bye.